Hey everybody, we're in the Christmas season and we are doing this theme, When Jesus Entered My World, and that translates into the sermon series that we're doing, looking at some of the stories around the birth of Jesus. I'm also challenging you in that to work on your own testimony, think about it, write it down, share it with people in your group, share it with a friend that is not a Christian. And to inspire that, we have recorded 3 interviews with people in our church that have quite a significant experience with God, where really something happened when Jesus entered their world. And so we're now going to look at the second interview with Joyce, who has been part of our church for quite a long time and has an amazing story of her journey with Jesus, really. So tune in and listen carefully, because she's saying quite some important and inspiring things. Enjoy. So Joyce, thank you so much for inviting us into your home, and I feel so at home in this chair. I have the yellow version of this exact same chair at home, so it feels so good. Thank you so much for willing to share your story with all of us, and I know it's a very big story that we'll have to shrink down into 10-15 minutes, but I'm so excited to hear from you. So how would you finish the sentence? When Jesus entered my world.
When Jesus entered my world. I don't know if there was an exact moment when Jesus entered my world. I am one of those people who was lucky enough to be raised in a Christian home. So there wasn't one moment. My faith did mean a lot to me from the beginning, so nobody really has an answer to that. There wasn't even a moment, it wasn't a Baptist kind of a home, so there wasn't a moment where I actually accepted Jesus. I was raised, to respect faith, and it became my own very quickly. It meant a lot to me in my teenage years and my early adult years. So I only know faith, but I definitely had some very, very rocky years in adult life where he didn't re-enter, but he meant different things to me at different times. There were times where I didn't really know what Jesus was in my life, and I was mixed up with other sorts of faiths, New Age, cult-like faiths. So he took different faces, I guess, but he was always in my life.
He was always in your life.
Always in my life.
But you have, for some time, kind of drifted away from the Christian faith in that sense?
To be honest, it's hard to say. I don't know. I didn't feel like I was drifting away. My ex-husband became a spiritual guru, a New Age guru, and I stayed with him. So my faith got kind of mingled with New Age beliefs and so on. So for myself, I still felt like a Christian. We were the radical Christians, as cult people think. So I am sure I was still with Jesus, but I'm sure Christians looked at me and thought, what is she into? So I think personally I still kept a relationship with Jesus.
Right. So even through that time that you now look back on very differently than while you were in it, you can see I maintained a relationship with Jesus through that time. There was a personal connection, there was intimacy, there was faith.
I think for a lot of us it's always a question, what do we do with the people whose faith doesn't look quite like ours? Do we still call that faith? So others may have disagreed with me, but for myself, I was still praying, living for Jesus, surrendering more than I ever did.
Wow.
I mean, surrender to God was bigger then than probably it is now, as it often is in cults. So I don't know if it was the real Jesus. I believe it was. I think I kept my relationship with him all that time.
At some point you journeyed out of that cult, and it's your ex-husband that you're talking about. You've got a very different life now. Can you tell us a little bit about journeying out and also kind of coming back to the Christian faith, not mixed up with New Age and all kinds of things? Yeah,
that was an enormous process. I was mingled with that group, obviously, because it was my ex-husband, and I didn't believe in divorce, so I stayed. Despite all the challenges, despite all the tests, despite all the overt tests he was putting me through, And they grew increasingly harder and harder. He started to be involved with the women in the group. It looked like discipleship, but eventually it became obvious that it was much more than that, as it often is. So after 18 years, when it was finally outed that he was in fact having sexual relationships with the women, it was kind of like, okay, it's over for me now.
Yeah.
Rightly so. And at that, in the beginning, well, that was massively painful, of course. I think there were weeks where Jesus was more real to me than he ever was in my entire life, because I had never been in that kind of pain. I remember distinctly lying on my bed, absolute blackness, physically and emotionally and spiritually. I mean, my world had just caved in completely. I didn't hit bottom, I lost the bottom, and I just said, I trust you, Jesus, I trust you. Oh gee, I think I might cry now, and I'm never emotional about this anymore. It's a long time ago. But it was very real, and it was a huge emotional experience because I believed I could, even though my world had fallen apart. And I kept that kind of emotional, strong connection and trust for quite a while. But I think over time, maybe over 5, 6, 7 months, the pain was too real, too big, and maybe trusting him was like he was going to fix things. I was kind of hoping he'd take some of the pain away, and that didn't really happen. And I think maybe after 5, 6 months, I kind of started to doubt. Like, wait a minute, what is this trusting Jesus? It still hurts too much. And I had to start processing and sorting out my mingled, messed up faith. What was I involved with what I knew of Christianity. I had been to seminary. I knew what Orthodox Christianity
You could have very
looked
well
like.
just thrown out the baby with the bathwater as well. That's it,
Yeah.
I don't believe in anything anymore. Or
Yeah, there's no way I was going to do that.
No.
But I really needed to sort out what was I messed up with. What do I think of real Christianity? I had sort of been encouraged to despise Orthodox Christianity. My ex-husband's favorite line was an imaginary God. He had put up signs in our city, Jesus Christ as Christianity is Satan's masterpiece. So he was very overtly antagonistic towards mainstream Christianity. So I had to kind of figure out, well, I didn't like mainstream Christianity at that point.
No.
But I still kind of had this faith in Jesus. So I turn to books. That's what I do. I have to figure things out. I just kind of think there are experts who have written about this. Even though initially I was very reluctant to read anything written by a Christian. Well, first I went to L'Abri. I don't know if people have heard of L'Abri. It was started by Francis Schaeffer, a theologian, early 1900s, I'm not sure. So I went to L'Abri kind of reluctantly, scared. It was my first time that I was actually hanging out with Christians, and I was very, very skeptical, cynical of Christians. But it got through to me. The leader there was very educated and very intelligent, and I would talk to him a lot. And I remember once saying to him, even though I was trained by that group to dislike rational thinking, so there was a lot going on, but I remember saying to him, why are you so interested in apologetics? Why do you need to know all this? Because he was full of these intelligent answers, and I didn't really feel heart stuff. But I kind of challenged him on that, and he said, if I don't have answers, my faith means nothing. And that meant a lot to me. I thought it gave me permission to pursue answers. It make sense. I need answers. I have to sort this out. So I started devouring books, apologetic books, just devouring them, looking for answers, looking for reasons, looking for arguments for faith. Of course, experience could help me sort things out as well, but I no longer trusted experience.
You were looking for arguments for faith. That's incredible. So did you really want, let's say, mainstream Christianity, what it was like for you, or without saying normal Christianity? Was that something you wanted to be true, or?
I don't know. I just wanted to know. It didn't matter to me what was true.
You needed
answers.
Needed to know.
I don't think I really wanted mainstream Christianity to be true, but I needed to know. And if it was, I would go back. And if it wasn't, I wouldn't. I didn't really care. I didn't have a preference. I just, I think I needed permission to go back.
Permission? Because you...
Mental kind of permission, like, yes, I can believe. Yes, it's okay. It is okay.
I'm not a fool for believing that.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. I needed permission, mental permission, to go back, because it felt like going back to Orthodox mainstream Christianity.
How long was this time period of
3 years,
reading and
2,
struggling?
3 years.
3 years?
2, 3 years.
And then at the end of the 3 years, was there a moment where you
There were probably many moments.
surrendered, or
There were many. I
what did
think
it
when
look
I
like?
came back from L'Abri, that was huge for me.
Mhm.
I think I just sort of like, yes, 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 I can believe. I have permission to believe again.
Yeah.
So that was huge. I never thought I'd be back in church. And it's like, I'm not being back. There's no way I'm going back
I
to
can be a
church.
Christian, not come back to
There's
church.
no way I'm going back to church. My brother had sent me a CD, Hungry. I think a lot of people know it. We sing a lot of their songs.
It's a vineyard.
It's a vineyard. It just ministered to me and ministered
wow.
to me, and I would just weep and weep. So I mean, experiences
That's
were
incredible.
happening, but
That's my favorite worship song ever.
yeah, it was beautiful.
Yeah.
But I didn't trust my experiences. I needed
Right.
mental permission.
Right.
Eventually, I went back to a vineyard church, and I sat very, very back, and I just wept and wept and wept Sunday after Sunday. Didn't talk to anybody.
Right.
Yeah, and gradually I sort of became okay with being at church, but I stayed reluctant. I stayed, yeah, it's still always somewhat of an uncomfortable place for me in a sense, but that was also 17 years ago, so.
17, yeah.
Well, I guess coming back.
Yeah.
So there were many moments,
Yeah.
but things change with time in general as well, so over time.
So in that whole journey, like, who's Jesus to you now? Like, that you've been through quite a journey with him. Like, what are some standout words?
Jesus is this ever-present rock, just rock of a presence, just this rock of a presence that I'm allowed to doubt.
Yeah, and he's okay with that.
And he's okay with that. So that's cool for me because it makes me always realize it doesn't matter what I'm going through with my doubts. That rock is there.
Yeah.
So I just kind of ignore my doubts. They're there, and I just don't. I try not feed them. I just let them be there.
Yeah.
He's a rock. He's my only purpose for anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, life doesn't make much sense without that, without him,
Yeah.
without Jesus.
But, like, I'm so impressed with this whole story. Of course, I mean, there's a lot more details. There's a lot. I guess you could write a whole book, or
Which I
two
have.
or three about. You have. Sorry, I should still read it then. What would your recommendation be to people now, like maybe younger people, like in a journey of doubt? Because in my life, I've been in ministry now for a while, and been a 20-something Christian and had 20-something Christian friends, and I've seen an awful lot of them losing their way somewhere. In the end, feeding their doubts more than their faith, and at some point that turns really ugly. And I'm coming to realize that part of that doubt and is a journey that God is actually inviting them into to deepen their faith. But so often that's not where it ends up. It ends up with abandoning faith. What would your recommendation be to people that are doubting, but it's actually a sort of invitation to explore or deepen?
I think people have to know themselves what they need to nurture their faith, for one. I know I need answers.
Yeah.
So I know I need to read, but I also need my heart to be nourished. So I also need just to be in the present, worship music, worship songs. So I think a person needs to know, what do I need to feed my own faith?
Right.
But I am convinced that everybody does need some solid answers, and I don't think we have that enough.
Yeah.
I'm sure that that should be part of any kind of Christian training, because it's inevitable that people will start to ask those tough questions.
Yeah.
And then your experiences and all the good feelings and all the good stuff that God did for you will be put into question. Always, I think. So I'm sure that we need to accept experience. I'm not condoning and promoting, I'm not promoting a mental faith at all. I think we need experiences, and we need to feel that God is good and God loves me. We need the emotional responses.
Yeah.
But I think we also really need to have the solid answers.
I think that's so beautiful, because there's so many people that choose either or. Either faith is something that's experience based, or it's very rational and don't trust your emotions. But in your story, they really come together.
I really need
There's
them
an
both.
ongoing emotional connection, but then you're like, no, but that's not enough. I
Yeah,
need
exactly.
answers to all these questions,
Exactly.
and I think that's really incredible. Yeah. One last question then is, what can churches learn from this story? How can we be a place where people like you 20 years ago can kind of come back and come with all their doubts and questions and all
Well,
of that?
I'm in no place to give that kind of advice. I really mean that. But I mean, I have to be careful too, because I know that there are people who are relishing in their experiential Christian life, and that is working for them. And I don't mean to bash that. I
No.
don't. I don't think that that can actually sustain somebody forever. So
No.
I don't want to belittle it when people's walk is flourishing because of their experiences. But but to answer your question, I guess, is, yeah, I do think we need to be taught some of the reasons why we believe, especially in this day and age when, comparative religions and why is there one way to truth. I mean, those are legitimate questions.
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
Oh, yeah.
I can listen to Oprah and think, well, is that Christianity or not? I'm not really sure. And so I'm convinced that our young people, our students, need those solid answers. And I mean, I'm not the first person to say that, everybody, but yeah, I think it should be in our sermons. And yeah, and I think it should be, I mean, Alpha does a pretty good job, but that's still pretty basic.
Yeah.
And our young people are really smart,
Oh, yeah.
so they're asking fantastic questions. And
Oh, yeah.
so probably our leaders need to be trained to answer those questions, so they have, read all the apologetic books. And it's hard to remember that stuff, and I hate remembering it, but I often think, Joyce, it's kind of your job. It's kind of your job to be able to come up with some answers. And I've got sons who are still in that group. So it's probably my job to kind of equip myself, even though it's not what I like to do. Yeah, I think we kind of owe it to them to be able to answer those questions.
Just thank you so much for telling your story, sharing it with us, and I'm just incredibly thankful. And I've learned a lot from this conversation. And my prayer is that we can always be a church where people can come with, full of faith or full of doubt, full of questions, and that we can be a place where people find answers and discover or rediscover who God really is. So thank you so much for this conversation.
You're so welcome.
And thank you.
Thank you.